That relationship to God is the most important thing that we can have. It's the thing that keeps our nation strong. And I want to close by giving you one story about how active God is. Some people say, you know, I read these stories in the Bible about how God, you know, gave sight to the blind, or hearing to the deaf, or raised the dead. Well, a number of years ago, a young couple came to me with their little daughter, and she had craniosynostosis. Her skull was not growing, her brain was, so you could see there was a problem there. So we decided we would do a cranial expansion. Well, while we were in the operating room operating, you know, one of my assistants noticed that the anesthesiologist was getting a little fidgety, and she said, is there a problem? And the anesthesiologist said, we're having a little problem with the blood pressure. So we very quickly had to close and flip the patient over, and they started CPR. And, you know, 5 minutes went by, and they weren't getting anything. 10 minutes, nothing. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Finally, they looked at me, and they said, I think we've lost the child. I think it's time to quit. And I said, it's not time to quit yet. I haven't finished praying yet. And I said, Lord, you got to do something here. You see, this was the only child that this family had. She was an absolute apple of their eye. And I wasn't ready to quit. So they kept going. And finally, we got a little beep on the EKG monitor, and then we got, you know, a regular rhythm back, and we got her back into the intensive care unit, and we were kind of enthusiastic, but I remember when I was, by the time we were able to do a neurologic exam, it became clear that she was fixed and dilated, both pupils. After the anesthesia had worn off, she had no neurologic exam whatsoever. She was brain dead. And, you know, I went in to talk to the family. And, of course, I had to relay that news to them. And they were devastated. Can you imagine? Let me tell you something. I would rather, you know, take a machine gun and go out and fight Iraqis than to have to go in and tell somebody news like that. But, you know, it's part of the job. And they were so devastated, and they were so desperate, and they said, Doctor, is there a 10% chance that she could live? No. 1%? No. Well, the father then challenged me. He said, I know you're a Christian. I'm a Christian. Let's see who can pray the hardest about this. So we agreed that we would both go and we would pray as hard as we could. And do you know, within 24 hours, that little baby's pupils started working. And she started moving around. And it was an amazing thing. And everybody was talking about this. It was absolutely fabulous. We couldn't believe it. I was on cloud 9. And the next day, the baby started having problems with the lungs. Respiratory distress syndrome. Areas of the lungs started rupturing, multiple pneumothoraces. And by the time the day was over, the pulmonologist said that baby had less than a 5% chance of surviving the night. And I said, what? I said, Lord, what's going on here? I said, you were looking pretty good for a while there. I said, I can't understand. How could this be happening? And I remember I went on home. I had to go to Ohio the next day to speak at one of the medical schools. And I was leaving very early that morning. And my youngest son had a severe asthma attack, and my wife had to take him to the local emergency room. And then I got a call from Hopkins that the last working segment of the baby's lung had ruptured and that the baby was going to die imminently, and could I come in before I left for the airport just to comfort the family. And as I got my clothes on to get ready to go to the hospital, I got a call from the local hospital saying they couldn't get my son's asthma under control. And I made arrangements for him to be transferred by ambulance to Hopkins. And by the time I got done with all that, I had to go to the airport. And as soon as I got to the airport, I called the ICU to see if I could catch the parents before they left, assuming that the child was dead. And the doctor said the child is not dead. In fact, the child has rallied. And the child is making respiratory progress. And when I got back that night, I went to the hospital and I checked on my son, and then I went and checked on that little baby, and the lungs were starting to work. They had put on a special type of jet ventilator. And after a week or so on that ventilator, the baby came off, the lungs were fully functional. But now the neurologists and the rehab people were saying that this baby is not a candidate for rehab because she can't see, she can't hear, she's not going to have much in the way of neurological function, she's not going to develop in a normal way, and it would be a waste of time. And I remember I was heading off to California to do some site reviews for NIH. And I was there for 3 days, and when I came back, I went to that child's room. And do you know, when I walked in there, that child looked at me and followed me across the room. And that child could clearly hear. And it turned out that the rehab specialist and the neurologist were correct. She was not a candidate for rehab because she was perfectly normal and went home as a normal child. So does that tell you anything about whether God exists or not? You know, he is just as active today as he was in the past. And, you know, I don't worry about when people are naysayers. I got involved in lots of things early in my career so that, you know, I wasn't just spending my time in the laboratory and in the operating rooms. I was doing a lot of things with young people, and people were saying to me, you can't do that in academic medicine. You'll never progress, and you'll never be tenured, and you'll never be a full professor. Well, I've been a full professor for several years now in several different disciplines with multiple academic awards, 38 honorary doctorate degrees. I've gotten to know all kinds of people. About the only thing I haven't achieved is an endowed chair, and the Lord may have that on the way one of these days too. So, you know, I don't worry when people say, you can't do this, and you can't do that, because I know that if I put my hand in his hand, I can do anything. And you can too. And that is the key. We need to make sure that we don't listen to the naysayers and those people who want to throw God out.